Hello and welcome. My name is Barbara Wainwright. I'm the CEO and founder of Wainwright Global Institute of Professional Coaching. And today I have the pleasure of introducing you to Alan Boyd. Alan is the founder and CEO of CNS Vital Signs. And this is a great company that you need to know about. They have a computerized neurocognitive testing company based in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. And what is neurocognitive testing? Of course, it means we're testing a person or an individual's brain or cognitive abilities or function. Over 20 years, the company has administered millions of tests across over 50 languages. Alan is a graduate of both the University of North Carolina Pharmacy School, as well as the University of North Carolina School of Business. Early in his career, he was awarded fellowships in both public policy and health economics. He's been involved in clinical research for over 30 years and designing and implementing neurocognitive tests for over 20 years. Welcome, Alan. I'm so excited to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I think these tools that we're going to be talking about are extremely valuable and important, especially for people that are in the health coaching field or people that are coaching elderly people or caregivers in general. So I'm excited to be learning more about this. Tell me about CNS Vital Signs and why you started it.
Yes, so like you said earlier, it's a computerized neurocognitive testing company, and I started it because we in the clinical research world really didn't have a way to test for toxic effects or improvements that we could do it with flashcards and things like that. But as far as computerizing it, it made chronic testing or habitual testing or serial testing easier. And it essentially objectified what had been a subjective measurement. For years, you go to the doctor unless you had some overt behavioral issue or you were, didn't react appropriately. They didn't know anything was wrong with you. So our, sort of core business now is going to physicians, providers. We do have a fair number of coaches within some of the healthcare spaces. So it allows them to see, what goes on or what's going on the first time you see someone. So sort of before your interventions and coaching, you would give the test. And then after you intervene or coach for a while or try different things, you test them and then again and again. And you can very easily see in an objective format someone has improved or hopefully not improved. So it gives you a measurement stick for cognitive change. So it's very important. A lot of people are very concerned about their brain age. So this can tell you how you're doing against your norms for your age.
So true. A lot of people, when they start to forget words and things like that, it's a sign that there is some cognitive decline. And it's important to be able to measure that and get those measurable results like you talked about. I mean, in coaching, we talk about that all the time. What are the measurable results? So when you have somebody take these tests, it can give you a baseline of where they're at currently. And if they come back, how much time would need to go between the tests?
Well, it depends on what you're doing. Drug companies will test if it's in a phase 1 unit where they're doing a rising dose tolerance for a sedative or an amphetamine or something like that, where you expect a quick swing. They may test you 4 or 5 times in a day, but typically for the people that are following patients or coaching patients, you would do it whenever you think there's been a change due to treatment. So, so if you think that putting somebody on an exercise plan and you're going to test them a month later, you should see a change. So essentially retest them when you think your intervention may have made a difference. And that's important because people become more motivated if they're seeing an actual change as they're going through a treatment program. So I always encourage people, if they're testing people as part of an overall wellness plan, test them more frequently as they gain momentum and things start to improve.
That's outstanding. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So there seems like there'd be a lot of applications or a lot of professions that could use this tool. So I'm thinking health coaches would definitely benefit from knowing where their client is at. And what other professions would be good for this tool?
anywhere where you're measuring people's sort of their cognitive, their memory, their executive function. Executive function is decision making, and we know now that sort of the first thing to go when dementias take foot. It's not memory. Memory is a following symptom to executive function. And not only that, but depression, we have scales. Not only do we have cognitive tests, but we have scales that are probably familiar to your followers, like the 9 for depression, the GAD-7 for anxiety. Sleep is huge. We have 2 sleep scales, the Epworth and the Pittsburgh. So anybody that wants to really see what their cognitive state is, because one of the things we frequently see, especially with athletes, they think that they have returned from a concussion. They look fine, feel fine, but then when we test them, they're not fine. It's because sometimes you can't be a good narrator for your condition because you don't know that you're not okay.
Got it.
So
Yeah.
anytime that essentially life gets in the way, you should probably know what your cognition profile is. And it's good to have, we encourage people, we do a lot of primary care stuff, to go ahead and get a cognitive test. Then if you have a baseline, if something happens, so you can know what your pre-morbid status was. Now that's, we hope nothing happens, but it's always good to know what you were like before you maybe got hurt or something.
Well, I think there's probably a lot of advantages, but I'm going to ask, what are the advantages of a computerized cognitive test versus a professional just kind to do an evaluation on like their own? I know that sometimes when patients go in and they're being questioned, they'll be like, okay, who is the president and what year is it? And that type of
Exactly.
thing. How does that really help, especially for
Yeah.
somebody who's not politically astute, right?
Yeah. So those are sort of the old ways that we tested, and they still do that. I was actually had a conversation this morning with someone who was trying to arrive at a set of questions that he could assess if someone is impaired before they put them on a cognitive test. The big advantage is it's very precise, like the question about who's president, what year is it, what floor are you on, what animal is this. That's sort of learned over time, and it sometimes doesn't reflect your base level. It's like you can have Alzheimer's patients that are very good at doing a task they did their whole life, but they can't tell you what their name is. It's
Right,
these
right.
overlearned behaviors.
Yeah.
So the thing about this is it's the same test. It's a different form. The questions are different, but you're measuring the same thing. So you can do serial testing. You can see if your interventions are making a change. You can see, depending on what your timeline is and how flexible you are with your intervention, you can see which interventions make a bigger change into what domain. So broadly speaking, there's many domains, but the big 3 are sort of executive function, motor speed, and memory. So if you can impact those, that's the name of the game. And a lot of times with people, they're just going under or part of a wellness protocol, working with health coaches. Um, attention is just so important. It's the first thing to go and the last thing to come back in a lot of disease states like depression. So you
Oh,
really want to keep an eye
wow.
on that.
I did not
But
know
of course,
that.
memory speaks for itself.
Yeah,
Can't remember, you need
yeah.
to
But
do something about
attention,
it.
I didn't realize that attention was one of the main indicators. Did not know that.
Yeah. I mean, and it's tough, if you look at large cohorts or even small cohorts of depressed people, they can't attend, their mind wanders, they can't focus. So, controlling attention is
Wow. So
obviously big.
is there an age range that this would be most important for?
Yeah, we normed this test from age 8 to 80. Um, we do a lot of concussion testing for universities and high schools. So that's and ADHD testing for the younger cohorts. And then the older
Yes.
cohorts, we're looking at, of course, dementias and things like that. So we call it the continuum of care.
Yes.
And the test is age matched. So your score will be represented by those in your age group. So your score is not going to pitch you against a 28-year-old when you're 50. So it's normed for your age group, but you can see how you do against the 28-year-olds if you want to. And that gets into the whole brain age thing that's becoming popular.
Got it. That makes so much sense. I would think that there was, I don't know, I'm going to ask, is there an age or an average age or a range that seniors would be considered losing their cognitive abilities?
Yeah, after 60, everybody starts to decline. A lot of people before then, but there's, lifestyle choices you can make that will actually hasten decline. Like there's probably nothing worse for you than smoking. And probably after that, nothing worse for you than intemperate drinking or taking other drugs. And you just don't bounce back from that stuff. It's interesting, the optimum age for where everything is sort of, going along is 28. 28-year-olds
28,
are at
28.
their peak, yeah, and then after that, it's not a fast decline. But 28 is when everything you've improved as much as you're going to, and after that, you're going to go into a sort of a decline that's just part of living.
That's
Um,
crazy. I had no idea that people peaked at 28 in terms of their
yeah, as far
cognitive.
as neurocognitively, I mean, within reason. But yeah, 28 is a magic number.
That's a shocker for me. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Whew. Okay, I have another question. Is the CNS Vital Signs being used in any sort of lifestyle modification protocols?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that has become, especially, we've been around for 20 years, and initially we were doing a lot of drug studies. But as people have discovered us, we've done, at this point, probably 20 million tests in 20 years. A lot of people are using us as an objective measure of lifestyle improvement, you know, sort of health style. This is a health style, not just a lifestyle. It's
Right.
you want to go to 90 years old and die in a week versus go to 60 and die in 30 years. So this will tell you how you're doing. It will, and people can understand it. You can understand by looking at the report, or the coach can. If your memory is really bad for your age, that's not good. So we need to add on something. Or if your attention is really bad, we need to find out why. Look at this exercise routine we put you on, your executive function improved 10%. So, it's another, that's why we call the company Vital Signs. It's another vital sign. It's like heart rate and blood pressure and glucose and all that. We're telling you how your brain's doing. And it's more important, or it's not more important, it's just as important as everything else.
For sure. I
Yeah.
can understand that completely. And I think, well, a lot of things trickle down from the brain. If you aren't having excellent cognitive ability, the next thing is you're not going to take proper care of yourself because
Yes.
you're not thinking right. So it's got to
Yes.
start here, I would think. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that area.
Yeah, well, one of the examples we talk about is people whose reaction time slows. They don't take care of themselves. They get a neuropathy of some sort, and so they're becomes slowing. Well, start doing the math on slowing, and an eye blink is 300 milliseconds. So if you're 200 milliseconds slower to press the brake pedal, or 500 milliseconds slower to press the brake pedal, you can do the math at 80 miles an hour about how far the car will go. So, and we do a lot of testing for special forces and some branches of the military, and they look at reaction time, and it's a big deal. If you're 200 milliseconds quicker than somebody else, it puts you at an advantage. So it does
Absolutely.
trickle down, and that's sort of the base thing is reaction time.
That
So
is so important what you said right there, especially for military or anybody who's in a situation where they need to have an instant reaction to something.
mhm,
Being able to test for that and see the measurable results, like, yeah, you were this fast, but now you're this. Gosh, this seems like it'd be so critical in that capacity.
yes, it might be part of we'd like it should be part of everybody's physical exams, probably starting at least one or two tests starting at age 40, because diabetes has a huge impact on your cognition. And what, 40–50% of the people out there are insulin resistant, heading towards diabetes. And we've seen studies where people with diabetes, or at least insulin resistant type 2, their cognition is actually worse than people with 2 copies of a risky Alzheimer's gene. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So we're getting close to the end of our interview, but this has been so fascinating for me. Last question I have here is, what would you say are the best practices for using this CNS Vital Signs test in terms of lifestyle and health span protocols?
Yeah, so the best thing to do, and what we see every day, and how people have been using this for, especially around COVID, people started really caring about, or more people started caring about lifespan, health span. If you have a new client or even an existing client, a new client especially, give them the test.
Yes.
Find out what you're working with, what's coming through the door, as we say. And you probably have other intakes that you do. And if you want to catch a depression scale, some people don't, or an anxiety scale or sleep scale, we have that baked in too. So you don't just have to do cognitive tests with us. If you just want to do scales, forms, we don't even charge for that. We think it's so important that everybody sort of know what their depression protocol is, or profile is. And sleep is, everything ends and begins with sleep, right? So you got to be really healthy.
Yes.
So you will be able to gather how they come through the door with their depression score and their sleep score, and maybe if you care, generalized anxiety score. So at the very minimum, do that, and then you may want to add a cognitive test. And if I'm looking at the sort of minimum cognitive test, you would want to do an executive function test, because that's the first thing to sort of go with dementias. And then a couple memory tests and a couple motor speed tests. So you're looking at 15–20 minutes of the smallest group of tests that you could really set a baseline with. And then just whatever you do as part of your routine for your treatment or your intervention, just start it. And then when you think there's been time to see a change, give them another test. See if they've improved, gotten worse. And then just keep that up and just try to optimize it. And at some point, you can only get so good. There's limits to human performance. So some of the tests will allow you, they're gonna provoke you, they're gonna run you to failure. So you're going to see how good you can be. So within the lifestyle, health style place, it's like just keeping an eye on your cognition. And if something sort of falls off the cliff and your memory gets really bad after a while, well, then you go see a neurologist or something. So it's just keeping an objective eye. The overarching thing is to keep an objective eye on your overall cognition. And then the other thing for the coaches is, of course, to be able to measure the effects of their interventions or treatments or their coaching. So it's going to give you a score that's based off the cognitive responses.
Yeah, I think this is so important. And I would almost recommend that people start at 28 to get their baseline, because if 28 is the peak, then that would be the perfect place to get your baseline. You'd be able to see where you're at going forward.
Yeah, I need to refine what I said. You should really get this at like 16.
Okay.
Because if you get hurt, you're in a concussion, those are the times of your life when you're very active. So it's sort of like, put it with your vaccine papers. I took a cognitive test. This was my cognitive baseline. So if you're going to really look at the whole continuum of care, and like I said, I think some portion of this, not the whole test, but I think everybody at their annual physical should get a memory test and a motor speed and attention test.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, I mean, they would know. And then you've looked at heart, lungs,
right,
glucose, all that. So it's just another pillar of longevity and health.
That is so brilliant, because I know for a physical exam, they're doing a physical exam, but they're not doing exam on the brain. They're taking your blood pressure, they're doing your blood exam, making sure your cholesterol is okay. What about your cognitive ability? They don't do that unless they sense there's a problem, and that's only
Yes,
when somebody else says, hey, I think my mom or my dad or
that's
my
right.
so gosh, it should be part of a normal standard physical exam every year to go in, just like you said, to go in and have this exam and find out where you're at. Am I sliding, or am I maintaining at least, right?
Yeah, and your followers may be, part of the lightning rod that gets this done. If you're testing people, they're not getting this at the doctor's office unless it's a very progressive provider. So you guys give it as part of your treatment, and then if somebody's really low, you could say, "Oh my goodness, this is," and you test them again. It's just like anything else. If they score really poorly, wait a week and test them again. Just like any poor lab test, you would repeat it. And,
Yes.
you guys, you may do somebody a tremendous favor by helping them identify something early. And contrary to 20 years ago, when we thought that some of these dementias were just a full-blown death sentence, we know there's things you can do now. It requires
Right.
profound
Yeah.
lifestyle changes,
Yes.
but it's not what it was. And, you guys can help contribute to the good of all that.
Yes, yes, that makes a whole lot of sense. So we need to definitely get this message out. Well, before I let you go, I noticed in your background you have signs that say blue, but they're in green, black. There is one that's blue, but the other one's red.
Yes.
So please explain that.
Yeah, that's all part of a famous cognitive test called the Stroop. And part of the Stroop test was people with frontal lobe um, issues. Sometimes, if you show them the word red and blue and ask them what this word says, they'll say blue. They cannot inhibit. The color means more to them than what the word says, and the vice versa. So
Okay.
it's just a representation of a very famous. This test has been around since the 30s, and we computerized it. But it's really interesting. Everybody notices that. I think I'm trying to be really artistic, but I'm really not.
That's funny. I love it. Well, that's so interesting. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our organization? I really appreciate your time. And I think it's so important what we just kind of stumbled on, which is physical exams, if they're done on an annual basis, should include this, because this is part of your physical body too. But if they're not considering it right now, wow, that's a huge mistake.
Well, yeah, and you guys might be the ones to sort of help lead the charge here, or help pull this to the forefront, because the doctors, the providers, they're taught this traditional physical, and they're looking at lab values, and they're trying to keep you alive. They don't want something to kill
Right.
you. Where you know they don't have time to do a
Right.
30-minute flashcard test like
Right.
my provider. I'd say, how do you assess? How would you know if I was having a mental issue? He says, well, when I talk to you, I can tell, because I'm going to ask you questions. And he has a what he calls an animal naming card, which just has a rhinoceros and a giraffe, and he flips them over. And if you don't know what those are, he starts to be concerned. But some people may not know what those are. you know.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking
So
about.
yeah,
I mean, if
it's one of
somebody
those
asked me to
things you
name
just
the
don't have
last,
time to do.
right? If somebody asked me to name the last 10 presidents, I'd be really hard pressed to do that. So, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
certainly we know who our leader is today, but that's a, great point. Some people don't know the answers, and then how do you judge that? That's again, getting down to being subjective, and
Right.
really good. Yeah. All right. So any last words for the coaches out there who can kind of lead the charge and get people to be aware of this ability to test somebody's cognitive capabilities, provide a baseline, and then revisit and see if there's any, progress, either in a good way or in a bad way, whatever. At least we're now able to measure and get some results.
Absolutely. As we say, we objectify what has been the subjective.
There you go.
So, yeah, and you guys are in the perfect position. You are seeing people when they're sort of the worried well, they want to improve, and this will give you a chance to show them if their brain function is improving or if it's declining. If it's declining, you can help them make the next choice.
That is so excellent, and I really appreciate your time. And I'll just kind of note for the Wainwright Global Coaches, I have a gift from Alan here that I'm going to be sharing with you, and I sure do appreciate your time. And for those of you that are not Wainwright Global Coaches, thank you so much for listening to this interview. And you can still find out more about this assessment at cnsvs.com, and we'll put that on the notes underneath the video. So thank you so much, Alan.
Well, thanks for having me.
Okay.
What you guys do is important. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much.